Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Integrity Systems Company Stand By What You Sell webinar, especially for South Australia. I'm Deanna Lush from Ag Communicators. I'm actually based here in SA on our farm at Palmer, and I'm helping out with facilitation for the session. So tonight is all about helping you to understand the elements of Australia's red meat integrity system and providing you with practical tips so you can stand by what you sell. The webinar is hosted by Integrity Systems Company with support nationally from the peak industry councils. So that's Sheep Producers Australia, Cattle Council of Australia, and the Goat Industry Council of Australia. And here in SA, we are supported by Primary Industries and Regions SA, and also the state farming organisation Livestock SA. We have a great spread across SA tonight with 380 registrations, and that's all the way from Oodnadatta in the north to Mount Gambier in the south. Now, a few housekeeping items before we get going. So we're running today's session as a webinar, so this does mean that your microphones are on mute, but we want to be very interactive, and so welcome any questions that you might have as we go through. We have the Q&A function enabled, so if Zoom's not your platform or you haven't used it for a while, just move your cursor to the bottom of your screen and you'll see the Q&A button. Just click or tap on that one and type your questions in there. We will answer them as we go through the webinar, and then we'll have a general Q&A section at the end as well. Now, if we have a significant tech issue where you can't see or hear us anymore, we'll close the meeting and send you a new invite within 10 minutes of the closure and just pick up where we left off. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we're all good for this evening. Now, just some introductions, who we have on the call tonight. So our presenter this evening is Kathleen Allen, and Kathleen is Communications and Evaluation Manager for ISC. She's responsible for all of the rollout of communication and stakeholder engagement activities right across the organisation. Kathleen is based on a livestock property at Yass in New South Wales. So in addition to her ISC role, she is speaking from practical experience tonight in putting the integrity system into practice on her own farm. Now, joining us later, we will have Damon Holmes, and he's ISC's Integrity Program Manager. He's originally from a cattle property in central Queensland, where they've been long-term suppliers direct to Woolworths, and he's now based in Sydney, working in traceability and food safety and overseeing the integrity programs. We also have Emily Duncanson, who's the ENVD Product Manager based near Ipswich in Queensland, and other members of the ISC team on tonight's call Chief Operating Officer Joe Quigley, and Communications Officer Joe Gangemi, and Project Officer Claire Austin. So we really do have the ISC Brains Trust on the line tonight. From South Australia, we have Denise Rendell. Denise will be very familiar to many of you. She manages the NLIS program for SA within PIRSA. And we also have two new faces working in biosecurity extension in SA. So that's Penny Caines and Emily Buddle. They're both on the call tonight, and they're both based in regional SA. Their roles are actually funded by PIRSA and Animal Health Australia, and they are both working with Livestock SA through the Red Meat and Wool Growth Program to help producers with their on-farm biosecurity. So we'll hear a bit more about them and the One Biosecurity Program a bit later in the session. Now, I should also mention, I've missed one person from ISC, and that is Lisa Barrios. And Lisa is the LPA Product Manager. So Livestock Production Assurance is the program that she oversees. Now, the session will be recorded tonight, and we will circulate the link in an email to you in the next 24 hours, along with some resources to help guide you in your use of the integrity system programs. We also have a short evaluation link at the end of the presentation, and we really just want to get your feedback and understand if finding this format is the best way for you to get updates, also understand whether the best time of day, we'd love your feedback on that front. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Kathleen to start the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Deanna. Welcome everybody, and a massive shout out to the panel. So we definitely do have the Brains Trust on the call here tonight, and it's really exciting. It looks like we've got over 220 people on the call, so I do hope that we don't break the internet, and it's great that we've got a team from all around Australia presenting to you tonight. in SA. So very quickly, a bit of a summary of tonight's agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the role of Integrity Systems Company, the importance of the red meat integrity system to Australian livestock, the integrity system programs which make up that system, they being Livestock Production Assurance or LPA and the National Livestock Identification System. We'll touch on the changes to the national vendor declarations that were recently announced, and also introduce you to or give you a refresher on the new ENBD platform, which is certainly faster and easier to use. And then we'll also talk about livestock data link and getting all your accounts in one place to make your life a whole lot easier using MyMLA. So I guess just to put it into context, and quite often we get questions about the different roles and responsibilities of the organisations, and there are a number of organisations that make up the Australian red meat industry. So Integrity Systems Company, it's a subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia, and both Meat and Livestock Australia and Integrity Systems Company are what you refer to as service providers to the industry. Now, the organisations there in the top row, they're often referred to as the peak industry councils, and they are focused on policy and strategy. So they advocate on behalf of producers to decision makers, and quite often it's the state farming organisation that makes up the membership of those peak industry councils as well. Then on the bottom row there, we have the service providers across the various sectors that make up the red meat industry, including the processing sector and the live export sector. But basically all those organisations have separate roles, but they all work together to support the future sustainability of the industry. So a little bit about Meat and Livestock Australia. So MLA is responsible for research, development, adoption and marketing activities on behalf of the red meat industry. We do that by collaborating with the Australian government and the wider red meat industry, and we do that by investing in initiatives that contribute to producer profitability, sustainability and global competitiveness of the industry. And the way that we do that is through investing that levy money. So every time sheep, cattle and goats are sold, there's a transaction levy paid. That levy is then matched by Australian government dollars up to a certain point, and then those dollars are invested by Meat and Livestock Australia on behalf of producers in research and development and marketing activities. So Integrity Systems Company, we manage and deliver the Australia's red meat integrity system, as well as a number of other programs, particularly around data transfer and data information being made available for producers to help them make their life easier on farm. And basically this red meat integrity system, this is what underpins our consumer confidence in on-farm production of Australian red meat. And it covers two key elements. The first of those is on-farm assurance through the Livestock Production Assurance Program, or LPA. And the second element is identification and traceability through the National Livestock Identification System, or the NLIS. And ISC works collaboratively with government and industry to deliver these world-leading traceability and assurance programs. And these, as I said, are the foundations of Australia's red meat integrity system. So the red meat integrity system, basically it ensures that Australian red meat is safe to eat and fully traceable. It provides that on-farm assurance, animal identification and traceability from paddock to plate, and it underpins the Australian livestock selling system. It gives confidence to buyers, retailers and consumers all around the world. So just to put all of that into context, so why is it so important that we have an integrity system that underpins our industry? Well, the Australian red meat industry is a $28 billion industry in 2020. It employs 400,000 people across 80,000 businesses and delivers products to 100 global markets all around the world. So ours is a very large and important industry, and there are certainly thousands of people who not only depend on the industry for their livelihood, but also for their food security and protein requirements. That's both here in Australia, but also all around the world. And this confidence that consumers have in our product is based on that traceability through the supply chain, which provides accountability right back to the farm where the animal was raised, and production to an assessed standard. Now, as a first world country, we often take it for granted that our food is produced safely and ethically. Now, this is not the case in every country around the world. And when you are selling food into international markets, and the majority of our red meat does go overseas, then it's really important that transparent, rigorous production systems that require audited record keeping on farm are essential. And international buyers require that these systems are in place. We've got some examples there on the slide where overseas there have been issues such as mad cow disease, African swine fever, foot and mouth disease, and it's these sort of risks to our farms and our consumers that we really want to avoid. So these just highlight why the integrity system is really important. It protects the industry prosperity, the market access and our advantage, and that's linked to our reputation for providing safe and high quality food. It supports premium prices that Australian livestock producers enjoy, and as well as that positive overseas perception of our product. And it ensures that Australia's reputation as a clean and green supplier of red meat is maintained. And whilst absolutely there are multiple producers and many properties that make up the Australian red meat industry, the red meat integrity system really is about delivering one measure of quality through one integrity system. And therefore we all have a role to play, regardless of our size or the number of our animals that we produce. We all have a role to play to ensure that we're able to stand by what we sell as an industry. Now, I realise that we've got varying levels of experience on the webinar here this evening, but as a quick refresher, we will provide some more detail about the two programs which make up the red meat integrity system, and they underpin our food safety and traceability on farm. The first one of those is livestock production assurance. So that's all about on-farm assurance, covering on-farm management of food safety, biosecurity and animal welfare risks, and the tick of assurance for your product for producer through to consumer. And LPA is what demonstrates professionalism of the industry and underpins market access for all Australian red meat. Now, the NLIS, or the National Livestock Identification System, is all about identification and traceability, and it tracks the location of every animal throughout its life. NLIS is mandatory for producers and is endorsed by major producers, feedlots, agents, sale yards and processor bodies. And it's underpinned by state and territory legislation around Australia, and it enhances Australia's ability to track livestock during those exotic diseases or food safety incidents. And there are three other elements to the red meat integrity system which are really important, and they are the Property Identification Code, or the PICs, the National Vendor Declarations, and also record keeping, and we'll touch on those throughout this evening's presentation. Now, the central component to both of the programs is the Property Identification Code, or the PIC, and hopefully you're all familiar with what the PIC is. And the PIC is required for registration with both the LPA and NLIS. Now, PICs are managed independently by each of the state and territory departments of agriculture, and they're incorporated into LPA and NLIS, and that's the only way that traceability and food safety can be managed at a truly national level. And as we said earlier, for an industry that exports a really high proportion of its product overseas, and in the sheep meat industry, for example, over 50% of lamb and over 95% of mutton is exported from Australia, then the assurance of a strong and effective national system is really important. So if you're an overseas customer, you don't necessarily care about what state your red meat came from in Australia. You just want to know that it comes from brand Australia. So it's really important that we have a national system and that we all work together as part of that integrity system. So livestock production assurance, that was that's the on-farm assurance component to the integrity system. So what actually does that mean for you on farm as producers? Well, LPA accredited producers commit to carrying out on-farm practices that support the integrity of the entire system. And this is verified when producers sign that National Vendor Declaration for all their livestock movements. Now, there's 7 elements to LPA, and they are property risk assessments, safe and responsible animal treatments, stock foods, fodder crops, grain and pasture treatments, preparation of dispatch of livestock, livestock transactions and movements, biosecurity and animal welfare. So the second part of, or the second program that makes up the red meat integrity system, the NLIS, so what does that actually mean on farm? So NLIS, or the National Livestock Identification System, basically it combines three elements to ensure or enable the lifetime traceability of animals. The first of those is that all livestock are identified by visual or electronic ear tag or a device. The second is that all physical locations are identified by means of a property identification code or a PIC. And the third is that all livestock location data and movements are recorded in a central database, and that database is the NLIS database. And when animals are transferred between PICs or between properties, that's when LPA and the NLIS come together, and that is through the Livestock Production Assurance National Vendor Declaration. So the NVD brings together all the on-farm assurance, identification and traceability details of animals, and that is the basis for ensuring a safe and traceable food product. So first of all, the NVD captures food safety information on every animal, every time it moves from property to processors or to sale yards. And NVDs provide evidence of livestock history and on-farm practices when those animals are transferred through the value chain. And you can only stand by what you sell by ensuring that every NVD that you complete is clear, correct and complete, or alternatively you can use the ENVD for a faster and easier way to manage your livestock consignments. So that's a little bit about the red meat integrity system and why it's really important. The next thing that we'll start to talk about is some of the changes that have been brought in over the course of 2020 and for the remainder of 2020 in relation to the National Vendor Declaration. So a review of all current NVD versions by SafeMeat in 2019 recommended that a number of changes be made, and they resulted in the development of updated versions of the LPA NVDs. Now these changes collectively will provide an easier, more efficient and cost-effective system for producers and supply chain stakeholders to enable them to interact with the integrity system a little bit more seamlessly. And this suite of changes across the board aligns with the industry goal of ensuring that the integrity system of the future is both simple to use, valued by industry and trusted by consumers. So there were three key changes to the NVD over 2020, and the first of those is the changes to the NVD versions for all species. The second was the release of the new ENVD system, and that happened at the end of March. And then the third is the decommissioning of the EDEC platform. So we'll just touch on each of those very quickly now. So new versions of LPA National Vendor Declarations for all species became available on the 1st of July, so a couple of weeks ago. And these are identified by version number 0720, and you can see they're highlighted there. That's a copy of the hard copy version of the NVD. So previous versions of NVDs will continue to be accepted until the 31st of December this year. However, from the 1st of January 2021, only the updated version of all NVDs will be accepted for all species. And just a point to note here is that under the MLA's Accelerated Adoption Initiative, there is no cost for NVD books until the 1st of July 2021. So what's actually changed on the NVD? So what's different? So we'll take you through some of the key changes now. So here's an example on the sheep NVD. So that this time there is now the inclusion of a number of electronic devices in the consignment. So that's now on all sheep NVDs. Now this caters for the mandatory use of EID in Victoria and increasing use in a number of other states, particularly for seed stock producers. Another change to the NVD for version 0720 is the inclusion of the destination PIC. Now this is actually mandatory in Western Australia and Tasmania, but it is optional for all other states. However, we would certainly encourage you to include the destination PIC on your NVD. If you're outside of those states, it certainly helps when you're doing your NLIS transfers on the database or checking information, and absolutely enhances the lifetime traceability of the whole system. So just a bit of a tip there, and throughout tonight's presentation you'll see these integrity insights pop up from time to time. How do you go about finding the destination pick so you can complete that part of the NVD? You can ask the agent or your buyer before you're loading your stock at the yards and completing your NVD. You can search for the pick in the NLIS database, or if you're using the eNVD, for example, you can use the search function there, which is really quite sophisticated. And just another note there about consignee and destination details. Just be really careful with this section, because the consignee and the destination can, from time to time, well, quite often, be different. For example, if you're selling at the sale yard, the consignee will actually be your agent, but the destination and the destination pick will actually be the sale yard. So just be careful when you're filling out that section of the NVD. And the other key change for version 0720, or the new versions of the NVD, is the removal of Part C, or the Agent's Declaration section. And just a note there, if you would like to order copies of the new LPA NVD books, then you can do that by visiting the Integrity Systems Company website. You can go and log in to the LPA Service Centre and order them through there, or you can email or call the ISC help desk, and the number is on the screen there, but we'll provide that to you with the recording probably tomorrow. One of the other changes for the NVD this year that I outlined was the decommissioning of the EDEC. And basically what this looks like is, from the 30th of April this year, you're no longer able to purchase tokens for the EDEC. Then between the 30th of April and the 31st of December this year, any previously purchased tokens can continue to be used. However, from the 31st of December this year, access to the EDEC platform actually will end. Just a couple of notes there. The new eNVD covers all the information that the EDEC does, but certainly in a more user-friendly way. And by running a single digital system, that will present a significant cost and time saving to the entire industry.
Righto, I'm just going to take a minute there to Kathleen. Just to remind everyone that we do have the Q&A function down the bottom. So if you head down there and click on that, we really do have quite a number of people on the line tonight. So we want to make sure that we've got enough time to answer all of your questions. So start typing them in there. Some of them we will answer verbally, and some of them we will get the people on the call to type out an answer to. So I'll just hand back to you, Kathleen, to get on to the next section.
Thank you, Dee. So I guess what we've done so far is outline the integrity system and then take you through some of the different, some of the changes for the NVD that have been rolled out this year for the different species that represent each of the different forms that are currently available. So ISC is working with industry influencers and producers right across Australia to build awareness, knowledge and skills in LPA and NLIS. And we want to help industry to stand by what it sells. So as part of that strategy is to communicate a range of practical tips on how producers can meet requirements of the red meat integrity system. So as we talked about right at the start, the whole red meat integrity system really is all connected. So it's important that we don't think of livestock production assurance and the National Livestock Identification System in isolation. They absolutely are connected. They make up the entire red meat integrity system, and there's a couple of points at which they do come together. So what we'll do for the remainder of the webinar is to really go through each of the elements about what producers need to do and provide you with some insights or some tips in order to help you meet those requirements. So from an LPA point of view, or livestock production assurance, basically what producers need to do is that you need to keep your online account details up to date. You need to maintain your accreditation, and this includes doing the online learning and assessment to understand the requirements for livestock and property management, and renew your accreditation every 3 years. Accreditation gives you more options for marketing your livestock and means that you can access those LPA national vendor decks for all livestock movements between property identification codes, or PICs. You need to manage your livestock and property in line with the 7 LPA on-farm standards, which I touched on before. And it's really important that you maintain thorough records as evidence of livestock history and on-farm practices. And finally there, you need to be prepared to undergo an audit if requested. So LPA is an audited accreditation. So as a livestock producer, you agree to complete an audit when asked, and this provides that accountability from paddock to plate. So from a national livestock identification system, what do producers need to do? You need to keep your online account details up to date, and if you need help doing that, we can absolutely help you do that. We've got some resources which I'll touch on later on. You need to order and use the NLIS tags as identifiers for every animal on your pick, and the required tag types differ a little bit between the states and territories, but every animal must be tagged with an accredited NLIS device and can't be moved to another pick without one, including to another farm, feedlot, sale yard or processor. You need to make sure that you record movements of livestock in the NLIS database, so those transfers between picks must be recorded by transferring the tags in the database. Now this is really important for that traceability element. And the person receiving the livestock is responsible for completing the transfer. Now the time frames for property to property transfers vary, so you need to check that requirement with your state. All producers need to regularly check their own records against the database to make sure that the transfers have been completed. This is particularly important if you're relying on sale yards or livestock agents to do the transfer for you, because ultimately you're responsible as the producer, so you need to make sure that those transfers have been done. And it's recommended that you do a pick reconciliation every year to ensure that the database is an accurate record of the devices and the livestock on your property. And to ensure that lifetime livestock traceability, the database sometimes will issue automated emails when differences or discrepancies occur. So if you send an animal to the sale yards, for example, and there's a tag missing, or that tag wasn't previously registered to your pick, you will get a notification of a discrepancy, and it's really important that you follow up with those discrepancies when you receive them. Now, producers also need to remember that completing those transfers on the database is also an auditable requirement as part of the LPA program, and that auditors will review NVDs, ENBDs and NLIS transfers as part of the auditing process. So from a national vendor declaration point of view, what do producers need to do? So again, you need to maintain your LPA accreditation so that you can continue to access national vendor declarations. Now, NVDs are a legal document, and they are your declaration that you have met the requirements of the LPA program. This declaration is married to the livestock's lifetime traceability when the transfer is completed on the database. So assurance and traceability absolutely need to go hand in hand so that our customers can continue to remain confident in our integrity system and therefore in the red meat that comes from Australia. So when you tick boxes on your NVD, you are declaring that your on-farm practices meet those LPA requirements and therefore our customers' expectations. A tick on an NVD must be backed up by accurate farm records, because this is your pledge that the meat from your farm has been produced safely, ethically and meets biosecurity requirements, and it means that you stand by what you sell. And just a really important point to note there, that even if you're a really small producer or you're a seed stock producer and you're not necessarily, or you're a wool producer, for example, everybody in the red meat industry is part of the food chain, so we are actually at some point producing meat. So it's really important that we do accept and understand that we are producing documentation that supports food safety claims in terms of the product that's coming from our farm. It's also really important that you file your completed NVDs in case of an audit, and as I said earlier, that the NVDs and the NLIS transfers are part of LPA audits, because that consumer confidence, again, relies on assurance and traceability being linked throughout the system and throughout the supply chain. So make sure you complete your NVDs properly and make sure that the NLIS transfer is done, and that when you do your NLIS transfer, that you refer to the NVD number excuse me, on that transfer on the database. So the remainder of the webinar will really be around providing you with some practical tips so that you can stand by what you sell. But the biggest tip to stand by what you sell is to make sure that every single LPA NVD that you fill out is both clear, correct, and complete. That's really important, and that's the only way that you're going to be able to stand by what you sell. Now, there's a whole page of tips in the LPA National Vendor Declaration booklet on how to fill it out. We're just going to focus on some of the key areas where sometimes there's a little bit of confusion or we see some issues popping up from time to time. So you'll see this map quite regularly now. You'll see it, as I said, in the front of the NVD books, but you'll also start to see it on signage through your state departments, but also through your rural retailers and through sale yards, and available from agents and the like as well. But what we'll do now is we'll just break down the NVD just very quickly, and we'll take you through some of those tips. But basically, all the questions in Part A of the National Vendor Declaration are often where producers need a bit of a hand, and these questions are about the animal's history. Now, this information is crucial for food safety and market access, so the key here is to stay on the safe side, and if in doubt, tick yes. So here's an example, question 1 on the cattle NVD relates to hormonal growth promotants. So the note here is that increasingly a number of markets will not accept beef or beef products that are treated with hormonal growth promotants or HGPs. So answering this question correctly is really vital to protecting Australia's access to those markets. So on the cattle NVD, you must declare if cattle have ever been treated with HGPs in their lifetime. And if in doubt, tick yes, and remember that no cattle for the EU market can be treated with HGPs. And just a tip there from the LPA learning section, don't forget that cattle treated with HGPs must be identified by a triangular ear punch. So if you've bought cattle and they have that triangular ear punch, you know that for future NVDs you need to tick yes around that HGP history. On the sheep NVD, make sure that you check your records for the question about the scabby mouth vaccination. Question 3, this is one where we quite often have a little bit of trouble. So this is about, has the owner stated above owned these cattle or sheep or goats since their birth? Now, if you have bred the livestock, you tick yes. If you have purchased one or more animals within the consignment, you tick no. Then you need to indicate the most recent date of purchase from within the consignment. So you cannot tick both yes and no, and you cannot tick all 4 options in terms of ownership. So you need to tick one answer only, and you need to take a really risk conservative approach, and you need to tick the box that correlates with the most recent date of purchase for the whole consignment. So with chemical and veterinary treatments, withholding periods for both animal treatments and also feed treatments, again, if you can't be certain of the status, you need to play it safe, you need to declare the risk, and you need to tick yes. And for all these questions, again, you need to tick yes or no and not both. You need to check your records to see that any animals haven't been treated with, haven't been fed restricted animal material, and these include meat and offal, animal fats, blood, or meat, bone, and blood meal. Again, really important, particularly to overseas trading countries. With veterinary or chemical treatments, so this is treatments of the actual animal, you need to check whether the livestock are within either a withholding period or an export slaughter interval. Now, an important thing to note here is that sometimes the withholding period and the ESI are not the same. So you need to check the drum, you need to check the chemical that you were treating with, you need to keep that as part of your notes, you need to keep that as part of your record keeping. And alternatively, if it's hard to read on the drum or you need more information, you can go to the APVMA website and look up the export slaughter intervals there, and we'll provide that a link to that website and the resources that we send round following the webinar. Similarly, with the question regarding whether or not any livestock in this consignment have consumed any feed material that was still within a withholding period. So again, in the past 60 days, it's really important that you tick yes or no, and if you have the details, that you're able to provide those on your NVD. So again, checking your records. And the final part of step A is the declaration. As I said earlier, the declaration is your guarantee that you've met all of those LPA requirements and that the NVD is complete and correct, and that the animals have not had access to any restricted animal material. So again, don't forget that NVDs are a legal document and a part of your LPA record keeping and can be audited. The remainder of the NVD, or Part B, this is the section that needs to be completed by the livestock carrier, and basically the message here is don't let the truckie leave without filling out this section, and make sure that you have a copy for your records as well. Now, just a note here on mixed consignments, because again, this is really quite important. If you can divide the consignment, so the group of animals that you're loading onto the truck or you have in the yards, if you can divide them into groups based on their history, then you can do more than one NVD. But that's only if you can identify them and separate them at the other end. So either at the sale yards, at the processing plant, or at the other property. So if you can identify and separate them, then yes, you should do a separate NVD. However, if it's a mixed consignment that you can't separate, you really need to take that risk conservative approach, manage those risks, and particularly around the ownership of those animals, make sure that you declare the most recent date of purchase for that mixed consignment. So now we'll just move into the ENVD. So as we said, we've got the hard copy NVD, 5 versions of for the different species, plus EU and bobby calves. However, you can use the ENVDs, so rather than a hard copy. So we have a new mobile-friendly, very user-centric ENVD system that was developed based on significant feedback that the ISC has sought since the initial launch of the ENVD in 2017, and it was initially launched as an alternative to using those paper NVD books. Now, the faster, easier ENVD is available to all LPA accredited producers, feedlots and stakeholders in the value chain. Some of the benefits: it's more accurate than paper forms, and it ensures that the latest version of the NVD is always being used and therefore will meet market requirements. It reduces time and duplication spent completing livestock assurance and health declarations. So you simply go in and you select the different forms that you require, whether or not it is your MSA declaration, an animal health statement and the like, and you only fill out that information at once and it populates all those different forms for you. It reduces the cost of storing and retrieving historical consignments for auditing, reporting and administrative purposes. And you don't need to wait for new NVD books to arrive. And the other point there is that the stakeholders in the supply chain can log in and can view consignments, including receivers of animals. Now, as I said, the ENVD is not just an NVD, it's a complete system for completing all your consignment paperwork digitally, including those livestock assurance and health declarations. And you can access the new ENVD system by logging in to the LPA Service Centre and using your LPA PIC, user ID and password, and you can start creating consignments from there. So why is this version better? We've undergone a process of extensive consultation with supply chain stakeholders. There's been rigorous testing, including by producers and the feedlot sector in particular. You can print it at any time, including when it's incomplete. There's unlimited space for livestock descriptions. You can draw the signature or brand using a touchscreen device or a mouse, so you'd no longer need to upload a scanned version of a signature, for example. And there's new features and enhancements which are being routinely released in response to feedback that we're receiving all the time. So as I said, there's ongoing updates to the ENVD platform. So there's been numerous of these since the system was released at the end of March. These include a mixed sex option for sheep, lamb and goat consignments, removal of the save button from the transporter step, so the final step in the consignment. The look and feel of the movement information page has been updated, and there's been a number of performance issues have been resolved as well. And there's a whole heap of things coming up, but just to highlight a few, there's cows and calves sex option in the consignment details. There's the ability to delete submitted consignments and a number of bug fixes. And just a little insight there, ISC is continuously updating the ENVD to ensure that it meets those expectations and requirements of producers. We're really keen to give you a really good experience with the ENVD, and those updates are listed on the ISC website. And we absolutely welcome your feedback on your experience using the ENVD, and you can do that by emailing us at any time. So for the next couple of minutes, the remainder of the session, I'm just going to go really quickly through some insights or some tips for each of the different elements of the program that are some areas where we've identified that there's a real need for some support. So basically, when it comes to filling out the NVDs on the go, fill out as much of your NVD as you can before going to the yards. Don't get caught short. Always make sure that you order your new book early, or I'd absolutely encourage you to get onto the ENVD platform. Keep your LPA records up to date so that the information that you need for your NVD is always ready and at hand. File the NVD, keep a copy as part of your records, and check the NLIS database to ensure that transfers have occurred. If you need some help with the National Livestock Identification System, things such as checking the database or checking that transfers have occurred, doing your PIC reconciliations, we have got some tech tips available on the NLIS website, or you can access those through the Integrity Systems Company website as well. We're just going through a process at the moment of significantly updating those and turning them into a series of how-to guides. But again, the tip there is to make sure that you check the database regularly to make sure that those transfers have occurred, because it's always a lot easier to make sure that the numbers are correct and can save you a lot of time rather than having to fix up mistakes later on down the track. I've talked tonight a lot about keeping accurate records, and keeping those records is a lot easier for you if you align those with the 7 LPA standards. So there's some templates available on the ISC website that you can download for free for each of those different 7 standards of the LPA, and they'll help you with your record keeping. So some templates there, you can order those for free as well if you would prefer a hard copy. Again, a few more tips about record keeping. Basically, there is no perfect formula for record keeping. There's a myriad of decision support tools or apps available for livestock producers, particularly mixed farmers that are also farming in the grain sector as well. You don't have to use those really sophisticated apps and decision support tools. Excel's perfectly fine, PDFs and Word documents are fine, or you can stick with your paddock book. The important thing is that you're actually keeping those records and they're easy for you to find. A couple of practical tips there. Ask your supplier to add the details such as the batch number and expiry date to the invoice so that you've got them with your livestock treatment records. Always think about using your phone, so take photos of information. Photos are always date stamped, and you can easily upload those into your notes function, or you've got them in the iCloud as well. When purchasing fodder, try and always download a copy of the commodity vendor declaration and ask the supplier to fill it in. If you can't get a commodity vendor dec for feed that you've purchased, particularly if you've got feed in an emergency situation such as a drought or a bushfire, then you can always just apply the default 60-day withholding period and tick that as part of your claims on the NVD. We often get asked what's involved in an LPA audit, and we could do a whole series of webinars on LPA audits along with a range of other topics, so please do let us know if there's other topics you're interested in. But the tips there would be, don't panic, that audits are about identifying areas for practical on-farm improvement, but that your LPA records will be reviewed by an auditor. So it's important to make sure that they're accurate and up to date. And the auditor will absolutely give you tips for future record keeping. And another little did you know there that for an audit, for example, as part of your LPA requirements, you need to have a copy of the Australian Animal Welfare Standards and Guidelines on hand. You don't need to print it off and have a hard copy. You do, however, need to download it, know where it is, bookmark it, make sure your team members have access to it so that you can fulfil that requirement. So Integrity Systems Company has a range of both digital and hard copy tools where you can get a heap of more information to help you meet your requirements as part of the integrity system. There's the Integrity Systems Company website, which is a one-stop shop for all things integrity. We have our monthly newsletter, Integrity Matters, so if you don't currently receive that, please send us an email, or you can subscribe on our website. We're across all the usual social and digital channels, including Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. However, we do have a number of hard copy resources available as well, and you will see that more and more in coming months as we roll out a number of other big projects in sale yards and with livestock agents and retailers. As I said, on the website, we've got integrity videos, how to complete, how-to animations. There's the LPA learning materials, whole heap of really great FAQs available. There's fact sheets. There's the record keeping templates that I talked about before. And if you really are stuck and you find that you need some help, you can absolutely reach out to the ISC help desk, and the number is there. Now, one of the other tools and resources that we do have available is, and would be of particular relevance in South Australia, is the Livestock Data Link program. So Livestock Data Link basically helps producers increase that carcass compliance through both analytics and reporting, and therefore helps you to improve the bottom line for both yourselves as also the red meat processor. There's 4 modules available within the Livestock Data Link program, and they are around carcass compliance. There's animal disease and defect information available for both beef and sheep now. There's breeder data information for beef cattle, and also a predictive lean meat yield percentage as well. So Livestock Data Link, again, a really great product, and absolutely, if you're interested in that, there's some great tools online. But again, if it's something that you're interested in, we could do a future session just on LDL. And just before I wrap up and we go to questions, because I can see my screen is just pinging away with questions, which is really great. Just a really a plug for MyMLA. So basically, by signing up to MyMLA, you can access all your integrity accounts and market information in a customised dashboard. The important thing there is that it brings all your integrity accounts into one place, and you only need to remember one username and one password for all of those programs by linking your accounts rather than remembering several different passwords and login details. Plus, you also get some personalised and applicable content in a customised dashboard for you. So again, there's some resources online, and we'll send that out in the email tomorrow for you as well. But MyMLA gives you access to weather forecasts to your area, prices and markets, again for your farming system, and events, news and information, and links through to R&D information from the MLA website. But just note that if you do want to link your accounts, you need to go to that section up the top there, have your credentials ready, and therefore you'll be able to link all your accounts and only need to access them the one time. Now, as Dee said right at the start, we've got a real brains trust on the call this evening, and as producers in South Australia, you certainly have access to some great local resources, and from Livestock SA and Animal Health Australia, you've got Penny and Emily working with the red meat and wool industries to implement the biosecurity practices required across the state and certainly nationally. You're welcome to contact them if you want support to develop that biosecurity plan that identifies ways to reduce your biosecurity risk on farm. And not only does that meet your requirements as part of the Livestock Production Assurance Program, but also any other on-farm assurance programs that you might be involved in, and also as part of that one biosecurity program as well. And we all know that risk management is a really important part of managing a successful farm business. In addition, you've also got the team at PIRSA. Denise, who's on the call and pictured there, manages the NLIS program in South Australia for PIRSA, where she monitors compliance with livestock ID and traceability requirements, as well as providing technical support to all sectors of the supply chain. And that role includes education of producers, agents, sale yard and abattoir operators on their responsibilities for the full gamut of livestock movement documentation and reporting requirements. And Denise has been in this field for a very long time, since 1998, so brings a huge amount of experience. So contact details are there, and I'd certainly encourage you to reach out to what is a very impressive team in South Australia. So that's me. That was a long one. We've got 10 minutes for Q&A. Thank you, Dee. Back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathleen. Virtual round of applause for you. That is quite an effort. So much good information in there and so many practical tips for everyone. So we're just going to hop into the Q&A, and thank you, everyone. We've got a stash of really great questions. I will also mention at this time that down in the chat function, we're just going to post that evaluation link for this webinar. We really, really want to know whether you find this format useful and whether you find this time of day useful, because if you do, then we'll most definitely do more. So getting into the first lot of questions. So Denise, I think we're going to start with you. We've got some state-based ones around pigs. The first question here is from Tom. So I have 2 properties 130 kilometres apart. Do I need to have a pig for each property or just one? Ewes and lambs spend 6 months at each property.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Yes, you will need 2 pigs. The limit for a pig or distance between 2 properties is 100 kilometres. Because of that, disease risk statuses change. So there's a number of variables. At the moment, we've got 100 k's between blocks of land.
Okay, thank you. And just to answer Tom's follow-up question, so if I need 2 pigs for each property, which pig do I tag my lambs with? They will be born on one property and transferred the next to be tagged.
Okay, so the lambs will get tagged with the pig of the property they're born on, and then you'll just transfer them on the NIS database to your other pig.
Great, thank you. Now, next question. So is there a place in NLIS for tags destroyed in fire? So obviously we had bushfire here in South Australia about 6 months ago.
One of the things you can do for tags where you're not sure of the status is to actually make them inactive. And that's probably the best solution, just in case you do find some of those tags that are not damaged. And there are tech tips within the NIS database on how to do that.
Great, thank you. Now, next question from Alistair. Is there any change to national sheep health statements, or are they still required?
The sheep health declaration is still required in South Australia. It is a legal requirement to accompany any sheep movement with the NVD. So that hasn't changed. Great,
thank you. Now, question from Wendy. How long do we need to keep our NVDs for?
Actually, can I butt in on that one? Because under our state legislation, it's 7 years for NVDs.
Yes, thank you. Right, now getting into some questions on ENVDs. So Emily, Emily Duncanson, we might cross over to you if okay. So firstly, can you change the details on an ENVD if there are changes just before loading, such as changing the stock number or the stock type?
Yeah, so we've created our ENVD platform to match the flexibility of previous solutions that have been provided, such as EDEC. And we've also been aware of how these declarations get used. And so we understand that there's things that change right up until the point in time at which the livestock are being trucked out. So for that reason, you can submit a consignment and then you can go and amend the number of head. Obviously, you can do that digitally, seeing as we've allowed the system to do that. You can also do that on your printed copy if you don't have any service or access to a computer or mobile device at your yards.
Thanks, Sam. So what happens if the destination address is incorrect or incomplete on an ENVD?
The best thing to do here, I guess there's a couple of ways to tackle this one. Obviously, if you've printed that document, you'll be treating it just like a paper copy. So you can correct that destination address and put your signature against that correction. If you still have your digital copy, the best way to handle it is to probably duplicate the consignment in draft form and then amend the details and delete the original consignment. And the reason that I say that is because you don't have to spend all the time re-answering the questions. You can just update the one area in which you need to, using the pick search or typing in the details manually in ENVD.
Thanks, Sam. Now, just some questions around what happens with the ENVD without an internet connection. So do you get the truck driver to sign the form without having to kind of go down to the house and get coverage? So do you want to just make a comment around what might be coming up for the ENVD in the near future?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the ENVD solution that we've got at the moment has been obviously through rigorous testing, but the one thing that we've known for quite some time is that there's an obvious requirement to have offline capability for ENVD. And so our next 6 to 12 months of work is really focused around making sure that every time an NVD is transacted or is part of a process on farm, we can facilitate that through various means of communication, and that people are able to do that in an offline scenario. So this might include a number of different inclusions, such as SMS messages. It might mean a native app that's on your phone or mobile device that can be used offline. It might mean a number of other types of connectivity based around Bluetooth. So that chunk of work, you can expect to see updates in the next 6 to 12 months. And we obviously think this is a really exciting area because this is what's going to, I guess, bring ENVD into its own and really make it accessible for everyone in the industry to use.
Thanks, Em. That'll be exciting. We've had lots of questions around connectivity and what's the next steps for it. So just back to the Q&A chat. So we do have a question from Gavin. Do truckies have to fill in their section in SA? So Denise, are you able to answer that one?
Yep. Gavin, in South Australia, truckies don't have to fill that section in. However, it is actually good practice for both the logs requirements that you've got to keep, but also the other thing is it means that it's a point of both parties agreeing to what's actually being put onto the truck, because unfortunately I do get a lot of phone calls about disputes about numbers on the truck and being delivered. So I'd recommend it just from that for that reason alone.
Thanks, Denise. Now, I'm conscious that we're nearing 8:30, so I really just want to remind you about the evaluation link in the chat. Please, if you could take a couple of minutes just to fill out the survey, we would really, really appreciate it. Look, we might just finish up, Kathleen, with a question and a comment for you. We do often get questions about, does this apply to hobby farmers or small farmers? So do you want to just make a comment about, regardless of the size, who's included and who's not when it comes to bottom header?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Dee. So yes, the integrity system does apply regardless of the size or regardless of the number of animals that you produce. So certainly if you're a small landholder and you are wanting to transfer those animals and either sell them on, move them on to another property, then absolutely all those requirements as part of the integrity system do apply to you. So the identification piece, so the tagging, and also completing the National Vendor Declaration and being part of livestock production assurance, because at the end of the day, most livestock does end up in the food chain at some point, so it's really important important, regardless of the size or their history, that we are able to provide that assurance to our customers, including around the world. And I mean, so the only other thing that I would say is that we do recognise that smaller producers certainly wouldn't interact with the integrity system as regularly as our larger producers, and hopefully we have got a range of resources available online that will help you with meeting your requirements. And as I said earlier, you're always more than welcome to contact us either online or through the website, over email, or contact the help desk, and we can help you make sure that you meet those requirements. But I would always caution to be prepared and do things in advance. Don't just decide one day that it's time for Daisy to move on, and you've got to go through all the requirements in a really short period of time. So, yeah, regardless of your size and the number of animals in the industry, you should be proud to be part of the Australian red meat industry, and that means playing your part, and we can help you, and certainly the team in South Australia can help you as well.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Kathleen. Look, I'm conscious that it's after 8:30, and we do want to respect everyone's time, so we really appreciate you joining us here this evening. We've got a couple of final questions in the chat that our panellists will answer. What will happen from here on in? We've been recording the webinar tonight, and there will be an email coming to your inboxes tomorrow with a link to the recording and also some other links to handy resources. So Integrity Systems Company has video and written Q&A on filling out the NVD, guide to how you work with the ENVD. So keep an eye out for all of that. Final call for your thoughts on the evaluation survey, please. And Kathleen, any last words from you as we wrap up?
No, just a big thank you to everybody that joined tonight. It's really great to have such interest from across South Australia, and massive shout out to the team from across the South Australia, ag communicators, and also my colleagues and boss within Integrity Systems Company. So thanks again, and thanks to you, Dee.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. So we're just going to leave the webinar open for another minute, just so you can click on that link and give us your thoughts. But thank you so much for your attendance, and have a great evening. Good night.